So the first tip is using the resource book. And this may sound extremely basic, but you'd be surprised how many people have studied short notes, studied class notes, all that without actually reading the resource book. And for subjects like bio, chemistry especially, that mistake is fatal. And why that is because if you look at the A level paper, the marking schemes are created solely from the resource book. I mean, that is the entire point of having a resource book, to define the boundaries of the syllabus. Because if you look at subjects like bio, there's a lot you can learn that's out of syllabus, but it simply won't be useful at this level for A levels. This is not medicine. This is not a degree. This is A levels, and the tips I'm giving you today are just for A levels. It doesn't mean this is the best way to get knowledge. It's just to get the best A level result. Especially for chemistry, if you look at it, a lot of people tend to skip reading the physical chemistry lessons because it's really big, it's a lot of volume. But there have been years where the answer for a question would be the exact copy of what was in the resource book, so much so that even the printing errors in the resource book were there in the answer script. And that just shows you the extent to what it's used. And also for inorganic, there can be so many equations that you can learn that simply aren't important because they're not in the resource book. So my first tip is use the resource book. For bio, it's a must. Read it at least 5 times. For chemistry as well, maybe 3-4 times you should. And for physics, I would say it's not a must, especially the first 2 lessons. The resource book isn't very concise, it's not very descriptive. But the fields lessons, the properties of matter, they're decent, so you can read it, but I wouldn't solely rely on the resource book for physics. So the second point is finishing the syllabus on time. And by on time, I mean, maybe 4 to 5 months before the A levels. And why I say this is because there are 2 extremes to this. There is either finishing the syllabus really early in like the first year by just skimming through everything and not really getting an in-depth knowledge. And there's also wait until like the last minute and finish in a few weeks and a few months before A levels. And so what's sad is in our country, the latter is the most common, where especially schools will not finish syllabus. You'll start off really slow, in depth, and then the last few lessons are just rushed, and you just know the equations and that's it, which is really not the best for you. Even classes at times will not really finish ahead of time, because if you're going to classes with the aim of finishing the syllabus a month before A levels, that simply isn't enough time to do full papers and prepare for the A levels, which is going to be our next point. So you'll have to join other classes and maybe finish from the last few units to wherever you are, because if you don't finish the syllabus at least 4 months before the A levels, it's going to be a massive deal breaker for you, and it's going to set you at a major disadvantage. Because since this is a competitive exam, the majority of people tend to avoid questions from the last few units, which might actually be easier than the more complex ones based on the first few, but they avoid those simply because they don't know it. So if you know all the lessons, you can select the best suited for you, which also might end up being easier. Past papers, and I cannot stress this enough, but aside from your resource book, your next most important material is past papers, because not only does it give you an idea of the paper structure of A levels and the question patterns, but sometimes even questions themselves are repeated. And going to write your A levels without doing past papers is like getting your license without doing the driving test. So past papers are a must, and especially in subjects like physics, out of the MCQs, you could do about 40 of the MCQs just from past paper knowledge, because it's repeated, just change in the values, change in the diagram, whereas the basic is the same. And so when you're doing past papers, make sure you also have a review book with it. Don't just do the questions and just mark a tick. Look at the review, look at the method, because at times, especially for MCQ, you might get the answer right, but your method could be completely wrong, and it may change for another question. So yeah. And when you're doing past papers, at least the past 20 years, you've got to do it back to front. So the MCQ, the second part, with the reviews. For bio, I would say everything past 2019 is fine, because before that it's just old syllabus and it's not really that useful. But for physics and chemistry, the past 20 years is golden, and doing that will give you a major boost, which is something. To do these past papers, you need time, and that is why you finish syllabus. Because I thought I could do like a past paper a day and mark it within that day, but unless you're like very disciplined, that simply is not going to happen. So yeah, past papers. And so when it comes to papers, I would say prioritize past papers. But of course, once you've done the past 20 years a couple of times, it does get kind of boring. And if you want something a bit more challenging, then model papers are really good. Like, it could be from classes or from government model papers. Wherever it is, it's fine. Just know that these papers tend to be a bit harder than the A-level paper. So don't be discouraged if you feel you don't know this question or this is like way too complex for you. That's fine, because if you put 100% effort into your work, then at A levels you can reap maybe about 80%. So yeah. And when you're doing these papers, make sure you do them having a proper marking scheme and a review at hand, because unless you have a teacher or a couple of friends to explain it, it's no point doing a paper without a proper review. And also, when you're doing these papers, don't just take a bunch of hours and do MCQ, because working on timing is another thing you can practice with these papers. Since they're a bit harder than A levels, it'll make A levels much easier, especially since there's added pressure at the exam hall. If you do these a bit tougher question papers under the same time, then A levels will be much more palatable. So a truth that I don't like to admit is that school might not always be as optimal for a lot of people, because again, it's usually a big classroom and it's catering to the average, basically. So most schools will teach you how to pass, how to maybe get like in the 60s 70s range, but the rest, getting an A grade, is mostly going to be up to you. But personally, I do encourage going to school, and not just for learning, but for everything else, for the extracurriculars, for making friends. Because if you didn't go to school and if you didn't enjoy school life, then A levels would be just one depressing exam, and that's not what it should be. Of course, it's not fun, but personally, I would say go to school. But if you are forced to study at home, I understand that. But one thing is, a school exam is very useful, because it gives you the same A-level exam environment. You're under pressure, you're under time constraints, and that is needed, because there's a big difference between writing a paper alone versus in a room full of people, where you keep seeing people turning pages and you're like, I'm still stuck on page number 1. So you need that pressure. So please go for school exams, go to school, but and don't go to school and just have fun all the time. In class, do your work. Listen to the lesson. If the lesson isn't great, just do some pace through MCQs or some past paper book, but go to school. And yeah, that's tip number 5. And that concludes the video. So the video is now done. You can click off now, go study. But just an introduction, I guess. My name's Jonathan. I'm 19 years old. I mean, gonna be 20. and yeah, I make these videos just in my free time. I'm not an expert, I'm just a student. I wasn't, like a top student or anything, but these are just tips that I learned, and that I learned from seniors, from batchmates, and so on. And another thing about school exams, don't worry too much about your average, because my withdrawal average was like 65, but thank God I got 3 A's. So yeah, I'll be making more videos on like topics like what to do during A levels, the weeks leading up to A levels, and etc. etc. But yeah, if you have any thoughts, just feel free to leave them in the comments. And with that, God bless. Yeah.